Hello again and welcome back to our course on Outlook 2013. In this section we're going to take a more detailed look at account management. We've already set up one email account. It's a Microsoft Live account, and in the last section we talked about OST files, PST files, folders and related topics. In this section we're going to set up two more email accounts. We're going to set up a Google Mail account, and also I'm going to set up a business, a domain type email account manually to show you how to do that if Outlook 2013 isn't able to find all of the right settings for you. Having done that, we're then going to take a look at the PST file and the OST files that are set up and how we use the files and the folders that they contain. So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to set up a Google Mail account, a Gmail account. So go into Backstage View, add account, and then we pretty much just follow the procedure we did before. Email account, I'm going to call this Toby Google as opposed to Toby Microsoft. The email address goes in next, and then I type in the password. Click on Next. It doesn't take Outlook long to find the relevant settings. The last thing that Outlook does is to log on to the server and send a test email message to make sure everything's okay. And when everything's okay, I can see that I get a congratulations, successful message. Click on Finish, and now I have my Gmail account set up. As you can see, it has its own folder structure. The folder structure is actually different from the Microsoft Live folder structure. Many of the folders, standard folders like Outbox and Inbox, are common, but there are some other differences. I'm not too concerned at this stage about exactly which folders are in each of these accounts. I'm more interested in how the data in the accounts is stored. Now what I want to do, having set up that Gmail account, is to go back into Backstage View and click on Account Settings again, and look at the Account Settings dialog. And in particular, note that email accounts we now have two. We have toby.a@live.co.uk. It's got a tick next to it which indicates that it is the default email account. And then we have the Gmail account that we've just set up. Now what I want to do now is to click on the Data Files tab within the Account Settings dialog. There are now three data files. There's the Outlook data file, which is the default file, the PST file, and on this Data Files tab you can see exactly where that file is. And you also now have two OST files, and these are the files that are used to synchronize with those special types of email accounts, the ones where the email messages etc. are actually stored on the mail server, Microsoft Mail Server or a Google Mail Server, or whichever other service that I'm using. Now note the location of those OST files. They go into a specific location. It is actually possible to change that location, but it's actually a fairly technical thing to do. You can't do it from within Outlook itself, and as I mentioned earlier, I would advise you against doing that. Don't forget, the OST files you don't really need to back up. The only file you really need to be worried about is outlook.pst, and I'll come back to that a little bit later on. The two email accounts that we've set up so far are of different types. In fact, the last one we did, the Gmail account, is of an IMAP type, and the Microsoft Live or Hotmail type account is an Exchange Active Sync type account. Now the main type of account traditionally which people have used with Outlook is actually another account type altogether, and that's a POP account. And we're now going to set up a POP account. The important thing about a POP account from the point of view of what we're going to do here is that with this account we're going to be storing everything on the local PC. We're not talking about synchronizing with a Microsoft server somewhere or a Google server somewhere. We're talking about storing everything actually in the PST file. So what I'm going to do is to manually set up an account which will store everything in the PST file. And until quite recently that was the most common way that people would set up email accounts in Microsoft Outlook. Nowadays, of course, more and more people have more than one email account, and more people want the kind of mobile accounts, the Microsoft Live, the Google Mail and other accounts that enable you to move around, to pick up your email wherever you are, and in fact to pick up your email on many different devices including tablets, mobile phones and so on. So this type of account, the POP type account that I'm going to set up, although it's still very heavily used and particularly used in relation to business, it is now to some extent being joined or maybe even superseded by this large number of more mobile and flexible email accounts. Now, as I mentioned right near the beginning, I could actually set this POP account up automatically, but I want to do it manually, partly just to show you what sort of settings are involved, and partly so that you know if you do finish up in the situation that you have to set one up manually, you've got a reasonable idea of what's involved. So, into Backstage View, click on Add Account. This time I'm going to choose Manual Setup at the bottom there. Click on Next. Now I get a choice. Am I talking about a Microsoft Exchange server or compatible service? So if I were running on a work network here, I might specify my local Microsoft Exchange server. Am I looking at an Outlook.com or Exchange Active Sync compatible service? That's a service similar to the type that's used for Microsoft Live accounts. Or do I want to connect to a POP or iMac account? Now in this case I want a POP account. Click on Next. Now I have to type in quite a lot of information about the account. So I'm going to go through this a step at a time, but bear in mind that you'll need to put in the account information that is relevant to you whilst you're doing this. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to put in my name in here, and that is going to be the name that's used for this account. So I'm going to call it Toby Work, and I specify an email address, and that's going to be toby@tobyarnott.com. Now I specify the incoming and outgoing mail servers. These you would get from your ISP. If this is a work account that you're picking up, then the IT people at work would be able to tell you what your incoming and outgoing mail servers are. Mine is mail. And then thirdly, what I do is to specify the username and password that I would normally use to access this account. Also on this occasion I've checked the box that says remember password. If I didn't check that, then every time Outlook tried to fetch this email I'd have to re-enter the password to go with this logon information. Obviously that would be a bit tedious, but depending on your security situation you may need to do that. If this is some sort of shared access device that I'm using, I may need to make sure that I have to enter that password each time Outlook tries to get my email. But on this occasion I'm safe to leave that checked because only I can access this anyway. And what I'm going to do next is to test the account settings that I've just entered. But before I do, I'd like to just talk about the setting below this, deliver new messages to. Now with this POP account we're going to save everything within the PST file that I've specified. Therefore I need to tell Outlook that's where the messages go. Now I get a choice here, deliver the new messages to a new Outlook data file. If I actually wanted the messages that are coming into this email address to be stored in a separate PST file, I could specify that here. But if I want to use one of the existing PST files, bear in mind that I only have one PST file at the moment, but if I want to use that one, if I select existing here, click on browse, choose that PST file, outlook.pst, click on OK, then for this email account, when I fetch its messages and whatever else I do, they'll be stored in the existing PST file. So let's go ahead now and test the account settings. I get 2 ticks and everything seems to be okay. Congratulations, all tests completed successfully. Click close to continue, and my account is pretty well set up. Now there are some situations where there are a couple of other settings that you may need to adjust, and for these, if you're not of the more technically minded disposition, you may need to check with your IT people, perhaps at work or from your ISP, if you do need to sort of dabble in these settings. But if you click on more settings, it brings up another little dialog, internet email settings, 3 tabs. The general tab is a useful one. You can use it to specify the name by which you want to refer to this account. So if I actually want to refer to it by the name Toby Work, which I do, I'm going to put that in here. And you can also specify here the reply email. So if you're emailing people from this account, you can specify a reply email. Now mine is going to be the same one again, but I always like to make a specific point of specifying that here. And you can put your organization name here. There is no such organization as Toby Arnott Inc., but let's put that in there. Outgoing server. Very often when you're sending messages, you use an outgoing server called an SMTP server. You don't need to worry about that. But if it needs authentication, so that means if you need to log into that server to use it, this is associated with people sending out junk email and using your server to send out thousands or millions of emails. If the server you're using is protected by the person that owns it by requiring you to log in, you may need to check that box there. So if you're having trouble sending emails, that may be something you need to check. And the option there, use same settings as my incoming mail server. With the ISP that I use, the authentication information, that's the username and password for the incoming and outgoing servers, are the same. And then finally, on the advanced tab, there are some default what are called port numbers there. You normally won't need to change these, but I have been in situations where the ISP has specified a different number there or a different number there. And then the very last setting is actually quite an important one in a way. And what this says is, when I've downloaded my email, do I want to leave a copy of the email on the server? Now you could uncheck that and say no, because once I've successfully downloaded it, as far as I'm concerned, the server's finished with it. But you could say leave a copy there. That might cover a situation when things go wrong. And you can also then specify, do I want it removed from the server after a period of say 14 days, which is the default, i.e. I want you to leave a copy on the server but a couple of weeks later delete it. Or you can check this box which says remove it from the server when it's deleted from my deleted items folder. So I'm going to download my mail onto my PC, I'm going to use it, read it, etc. on the PC. But when I eventually delete it from the PC, delete it from the server as well. Now if you choose that last option, which is in some ways the safest option, you could finish up with an awful lot of emails stored on your server. It can tend to slow things down a bit, but this is again a case of personal preferences, what you have these settings set at. I'm going to leave the defaults there, click on OK, click on Next. It does the test again of both sending and receiving email, and when it's finished, click on Close, click on Finish, and I have my new account set up. Now one thing to note here is that the couple of test messages that I sent are shown, and also that if I now go into Backstage View, click on Account Settings, I now have 3 email accounts. I have my Exchange Active Sync account for Microsoft Live, a Google Mail account, and my POP account, which is called Toby Work. So I've manually set up a POP account in Outlook 2013. That's it in this section. I'll see you in the next one.